Hello, I'm Tim Smith, and welcome to another Monuments Monday. And here we are on a beautiful Monday afternoon along the Wheat Field Road. Now today we're going to talk a little bit about the 27th Connecticut monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield. The 27th Connecticut was part of John Rutter Brooks' brigade, which is part of John Caldwell's division of the 2nd Army Corps. And on the fighting of July 2nd, 1863, this brigade was thrown into the wheat field at a critical time and drove Confederate forces back out of the western edge of the wheat field and into the Rose Woods and all the way up onto a plateau on the western side of the Rose Woodlot. Of course, they ended up being overwhelmed by Semmes and Anderson's Georgia brigades and driven back across the wheat field, and this brigade lost heavy casualties. The 27th Connecticut is kind of interesting because they had sustained heavy losses in several other engagements and had a large portion of their regiment captured during the Chancellorsville campaign. So at Gettysburg, they basically were sort of consolidated into two companies, and they had, depending on which version of the count you like, 74 or 75 men at the Battle of Gettysburg. And although they're one of the lower strength units in the battle, they actually have 5 monuments that mark the progress of their charge across the wheat field and into the Rose Woodlot. Now, I'm sure, as most of you have, I have my own Civil War notebook that I used to keep when I was an enthusiast, you know, coming to Gettysburg and learning about the battle. And oftentimes I'd write essays in my notebook about the things I did when I was on the battlefield. And my notebook here is from the early 80s. And I have a passage here from 1984 where I talk about my interest in this stereo photograph. I used to go every year to the Gettysburg Collector Show, and I would look for early photographs of the battlefield, and I'd collect stereo cards and postcards and CDVs. And on July 3rd, 1984, I purchased this particular image we're showing right here. It is 2 markers along the wheat field road. This image is probably, the version I had of it is probably from the 1880s. And, you know, right away I realized that there's only 1 marker along the wheat field road near the position shown in the photograph. So I came out of here and tried to determine something about it. And of course, it's fascinating. Here we'll show another image of the same scene from a slightly different angle. Now, basically what had happened is these monuments, these 2 markers along the Wheatfield Road, are some of the earliest markers placed on the Gettysburg National Military Park. Really, there are monuments placed in the cemetery, but outside of the National Cemetery, there were 2 markers placed in the summer of 1878. One to mark the spot where Colonel Strong Vincent fell on Little Round Top, and one to mark the spot where Colonel Charles Frederick Taylor fell, and it was placed in the Valley of Death. And then in the fall of 1878, these 2 markers were placed along the Wheatfield Road by the 27th Connecticut Association. One of them marking the spot where Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin fell and where one of the captains fell, Captain Jedediah Chapman. Now, these 2 markers are no longer at this spot. When the markers were placed, the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association did not yet own the wheat field. Off the top of my head, the wheat field was purchased by that organization in 1882. And these markers were only placed here to mean that the men had fallen in this action in the wheat field. In 1885, the 27th Connecticut Association put up another larger monument in the center of the wheat field that has the eagle on it over there. And when they placed that monument, then they changed the other two markers that were along the road. The marker that used to be here to Jedediah Chapman was moved to the other side of the wheat field. We'll see that in a moment, marking the spot where he actually fell. And this particular marker, marking that used to say, "Here fell Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin," was actually taken away and replaced by a marker today that says that Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin of the 27th Connecticut Volunteers fell near where the monument is in the center of the field. So this one's actually been removed. And it's just fascinating to me that especially when I was younger and collecting photographs of the battlefield, that there are monuments that were once placed on the Gettysburg battlefield, but today those markers don't exist or have been replaced or have been moved to another location. So I'm standing at the advanced position marker of the 27th Connecticut. And they actually placed a monument here along this ledge at the edge of a field on the west side of the wheat field where they incurred heavy fighting on July 2nd as they faced off against the Georgians of Anderson and Semmes brigades that attacked through this area. And what's really interesting, I guess, is in 1889, they put this advanced position marker up, but along what we refer to as Brook Avenue, they also placed a regimental monument, you know, and it's very similar to the other monuments placed by the state of Connecticut. And it says on it, "Erected by the Commonwealth of Connecticut as a memorial to the valor of her loyal sons." And of course, it has the Connecticut seal on it and their motto. And but this monument doesn't really mark the advanced position, obviously, since they put one up in the edge of the woods down there. But there's another monument we want to show to end this video, and that's the present location of the monument to Jedediah Chapman, the captain who was killed in the battle. So here we are at the marker for Jedediah Chapman, a captain of Company H, 27th Connecticut. And we're actually along de Trobriand Avenue. You know, I really like the avenue that we just drove along. It is an avenue that has three names. So you turn on it and it's Cross Avenue, you go around the corner and it's Brook Avenue, and you go around the corner again and it's de Trobriand. So it's named after three different brigade commanders that were in charge of troops in this location. So this marker originally was along the Wheatfield Road next to a similar marker to Henry Merwin. And at some point, they replaced the Henry Merwin marker and they hauled this marker all the way across the other side of the wheat field, and they planted it near the spot where he was killed. Now, Fred Hawthorne, who's one of our guides and who wrote just a fabulous book called Men, Monuments, and Stories about the monuments on the battlefield, and he does a variety of monument tours, he actually came up with this fact. And I personally had never considered this, so kudos to him. But the original monument to Colonel Strong Vincent has been replaced. It kind of was vandalized and was replaced by a more modern marker. The marker that had been placed in the Valley of Death to mark the spot where Charles Frederick Taylor had fallen was replaced in the early 1900s and relocated at a different spot. And the monument to Henry Merwin that was along the Wheatfield Road, like we said, was replaced by another marker at a later time. And that means that this marker right here is the oldest monument on the Gettysburg battlefield outside of the National Cemetery.